So the project of this video is quite ambitious, but hear me out. I want to be on Books and Lala's channel. So if you don't know, Kayla from Books and Lala, every year she does a video where she reads BookTuber's favorite books. And essentially she watches a whole bunch of BookTubers and their end of year favorites lists to find the BookTubers she has the most in common with, and then she picks books from their favorites to read in a video. It's a super fun concept I've been watching every year, and I have been making BookTube videos for 2 or 3 years now, and I have never been featured. And together, we're going to change that. So what we have to do is to find books on my shelves that Kayla has given 5 stars to, and then I'm going to read them, hoping that I also love them, so that I will be able to feature a bunch of Kayla's favorite books in my favorite books of 2023 list, so that I can be in this year's Reading BookTuber's favorite books. Obviously, this is insane. I am fully aware that 1, Kayla has no idea who the fuck I am, and 2, Kayla and I have really different tastes in books. When I think of Kayla, I think of thriller, mystery, horror. If you got me and Kayla, I'm sure there's like a little bit of crossover, but it ain't much, which is precisely why I need this project to help me out. So I'm not going out of my way to purchase Kayla's favorite books. I specifically want to pick books on my shelf for 2 reasons. The first is purely scientific. I figure if they're already on my shelf, it's because I want to read them. So I have a higher likelihood of liking them, which means a higher chance of putting them on my favorites list. But the other reason is that I have recently counted all of my books, and so I am all too aware of how many unread books are on my shelves, and I need to read those rather than buying more. So are you on board? Does it make sense? We're going to go through my shelves and find books that Kayla has rated 5 stars that I have yet to read, and then we're going to read a bunch of them in this video with the hopes of finding some of my own favorites that I can put on my favorites list so that I can make it to Kayla's video. This is so convoluted. You get it, it's fine. So let's see what books I can find. Ooh, first one is easy. I actually bought this on Kayla's recommendation. Honey and Spice, it's a romance novel. That could be fun, right? Ooh, another romance that I bought because of Kayla. The 7 Year Slip. Let me just check. Ooh, she only rated it 4 stars. Now, I don't know how she determines a favorite when she's doing these videos, so we might leave 4 stars because I feel like they might be a bit risky. We're looking for the 5 stars. We're looking for the favorites. This is another one I recently got, but Kayla's given it 4 stars. Oh, I really want to read this one. We'll have to do it another time. Oh, Emily Wilde. Kayla just put up a video and she said she's obsessed with this book. So, I mean, I feel like we have to do this one. Ooh, Nettle and Bone. Kayla only rated 3 stars. That's a hot take. I will have to read that another time. I could read the 4th book in the Wayward Children series. I know Kayla loves this series, and I think I've heard her say that she basically just gives every single one every year a 5 star. I've read the first 3 and it has been an absolute roller coaster. I liked the first one, didn't love it. Loved the second one. Hated the 3rd one. So I am quite nervous about this 4th one because this will be the decider as to whether I continue in this series at all, but I guess it's an option. Oh, another one I don't have to look up is Seeve of Tranquility. Everybody loves this book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm convinced I'm gonna love it. So I feel like this is gonna be the safe bet of the video. We have to include this one. I know she didn't love Mexican Gothic, and I'm so bad at this. Oh, I know Kayla liked Kaikeyi. What did she give it? Yep, she gave Kaikeyi 5 stars. This one I'm a little bit intimidated by because it's huge. I feel like this is one of those books that I will either find boring or I'll love. There'll be no in between. Ooh, Comfort Me With Apples could be a good pick. I loved The Past Is Red by Catherynne and Valente last year. So, I mean, this could be a winner. Everyone in my family has killed someone. This is an Australian book. I've actually had it for a little while. I found it secondhand. And I know Kayla loves this. In fact, a lot of people are really liking this book. I'm a little bit nervous about it because I have not had good luck with mystery thriller. If you watch my recent video counting my shelves and like figuring out how many books in each category I actually liked enough to keep, you'll know why this makes me a little bit nervous. And keep in mind, in this video, we have a very particular target. We are trying to get 5 stars here, people. We need to be strategic. Oh, actually, I've just thought of something. With The Fire on High, this was out on my children's and young adult shelf. I have read all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books, and I've given them all 4 or 5 stars. This is the last one I have left to read, and Kayla's given it 5 stars. And I feel like with my track record with this author, there's a pretty high likelihood that I'll love it too. So these are all the books I can find on my shelves that I have yet to read that Kayla has rated 5 stars. And I think there are a couple that we need to take out. I think we can remove these two from this video. I think they're a little bit too risky. My history with this series and my history with this genre, I mean, I might like them and I hope that I will. But if we're looking for 5 stars, I would not hedge my bets on these books. These books though, these books I feel pretty confident about. So that's gonna be our TBR. How exciting! So this is my prediction of the order that I'm gonna like them in, but I'm hopeful I'm gonna like them all and that they're gonna help me stack my 5 stars in Kayla's favor to try and get on her video. You are aware that this is all just a joke, right? I don't genuinely think I'm gonna get on Kayla's video. It's just a fun way to build a TBR, just so that we're clear. But now that we've decided on our TBR, of course, we got to get to reading.
I can't even explain how much I just want to gush about this, and I'm so glad I get to do a live show for it now because I love Emily and Wendell. They are fantastic. It was fun. The audiobook was great. I had a great time, and I'm so happy I read this.
So I'm just sitting down and getting ready to go out and meet my friend Nick. Today would have been his partner's birthday today. She passed away earlier in the year. She was a good friend of mine as well. Her name was Anne. She was a wonderful human. So he and I are going to spend the day together and we're going to go to a gallery that she was a member of. And I'm wearing one of her necklaces today. But I am also here to tell you that I have indeed finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Now, I did like this. I had a good time reading it and I was optimistic that this would be a favorite for me. Like I've heard wonderful things about it. It sounds adorable. And so while I was hopeful it could go well, I also had the awareness that fantasy romance sort of stuff tends to be kind of like a 3.5 star for me. Like it's a fun, good time while I'm reading it and then I never think about it again. And I'd heard so many good things about this one that I just was hoping that it would have a little extra something. But alas, I just did not see in this book what so many other people have and what Kayla has. So for those of you who don't know, these are basically diary entries. We're following Emily Wilde, who is like a late 20-something expert on fairies. She's an academic and she's traveled to some like made up Scandinavian island to investigate and learn about the fairies that live there and to document them for her encyclopedia. And there is a romance that develops between her and a man who is like a friend but also an academic rival. But Wendell Bambleby as a name for the hero in a romance book? What the hell? It threw me every single time. Every single time I had to read Bambleby, I was giggling and not necessarily for the right reasons. Anyway, I think the reason that this just didn't hit in the way that I was hoping, I think one, the diary entries sometimes made it feel a little stilted or like we missed out on the actual exciting part of the plot and we were just getting, you know, a play-by-play after the fact, which is obviously the case for a lot of books, but I just really felt it in this one. And I think on top of that, I could not help but draw comparisons and parallels between one of my favorite series ever, the Lady Trent memoirs. Now that is different in the sense that it's an older lady writing her memoirs from, you know, a much removed position. It's not diary entries. But again, we have a woman who's interested in science and academia in a similar kind of roughly time period, going off on these field expeditions to become an expert in her field. And for me at least, the Lady Trent memoirs just succeeded in so many ways and so thoroughly that it just ended up feeling like Emily Wilde's encyclopedia was very much in the shadow of Lady Trent's memoirs. Now, is that fair? Is that fair for a book? No. I know that, but I just don't think that there was anything about this that, at least for me, really, I don't know, like got me. While I didn't mind Brambleby or Bambleby or whatever his name is, and I kind of liked Emily, I wasn't like in love with either of them and I wasn't in love with their love. But I guess just to me, there was so much of this book where it felt like Bambleby was making fun of her. He was laughing at her rather than with her. And then although a softness does develop and his like cheekiness is intentional, it's a part of the character, I guess I just didn't always like it and I didn't really entirely understand why they loved each other. So at least for me, it kind of came very out of left field. I thought they just had like a little bit of a flirtation, a little bit of attraction, and then there was like massive declarations of love. So I don't know, I enjoyed it and I was interested in elements of it and I thought like the Fae, all of that stuff was interesting. I really liked the characters that we got to know in the town. And in fact, in many ways, I think I found them more interesting than I found Emily and Bambleby. But I'm running late, so I need to head off and meet my friend Nick. And then later tonight, I'm going to get stuck into Comfort Me with Apples. And I am really excited about this one.
loved it so much. I'm giving it 5 stars, obviously. There's a vibe. This is my vibe.
So I'm back from my day at the gallery with my friend Nick. We had a wonderful day, and actually something really quite special happened. So before my friend Anne passed away, she had been part of the climate choir. As we were walking from the train station to the NGV, the gallery, we heard some lovely singing, and we turn around and the climate choir is there singing their climate Christmas carols. One of them recognized Nick and came over and said hello, and then they invited us to join in on their final song before they packed up for the day. It just really felt like Anne was with us today, and it made me really happy. But since I got home, I did get stuck into Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne and Valente, and it's only very short, so I finished it, and I really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this novella. I'm not usually like a horror reader. I don't read a lot of horror, and this I would say is very like light on the horror. It's kind of eerie and a little bit creepy and insidious rather than like graphic or horrific. And it's just one of those books that's a little bit of a social commentary sort of thing with a bit of a metaphor or a fable. And with Comfort Me with Apples, I'd say quite generally we're exploring misogyny. It is very short, so I want to be careful not to spoil it for you, but essentially at the beginning we're introduced to a young woman named Sophia who is married to who she believes is the perfect husband. She lives in this perfect little gated community. She's the perfect house, the perfect friends, everything is just perfect. And honestly, it all just kind of read a little bit like, you know, the opening to the Barbie movie. It is kind of one of those books where you just sort of know what's happening. It's very clear in what it's doing and the correlations and connections that it's drawing, but I just really enjoyed the writing. I really enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the levels of horror. Like, it was all just enough to be creepy and uncomfortable without being like terrifying. I really enjoy her writing, and I like the way that she kind of builds up a character and the themes around them. Now, is this going to make my favorites of the year list? That I'm not so sure about. I know I really enjoyed it, and I know this has left me wanting to read more from the author, but I'm not sure it's giving quite like 5-star favorite of the year vibes. But to be completely fair, neither was The Past is Red after I initially finished reading that. But it did end up on my list at the end of the year just because I kept thinking about it, and I kind of grew to love it and appreciate more over time. It was one of those books that lingered and stayed with me rather than just like finishing it and forgetting it. But I'm feeling optimistic. I feel like we're getting a bit of positive momentum here with this book, so I am going to dive right in to our next read. Thank you, Ollie. Yes, we're finished now, honey.
I don't want to overhype this book because maybe there are some people who wouldn't like this, but I can't imagine who, and I don't want to undersell it. It's so good. Like, I have a 5-star romance. We can cancel the whole video experiment. And not just 5 stars, but I'm here thinking to myself, is a romance book about to be in my top 10 books of the year?
Okay, I know I'm looking rough, but that's because I'm feeling rough. Am I literally about to come on here on a video about Kayla's favorite books and tell you that I've DNF'd one? Oh, this is awful. It would be one thing to come on here and tell you that I really don't like this book and I need to DNF it, but it's another to do it when I'm like in the framing of this video where I'm reading Kayla's favorites. Okay, but here we go. I'm just gonna tell you. I got 212 pages into Honey and Spice, and I'm DNFing it. I'm DNFing it. Oh my god, I don't even want to talk about it. So this is one of the books that I actually did buy on Kayla's recommendation. Now, I know she didn't recommend it to me personally. I'm not putting the blame on her, but I discovered this book and I became interested in this book after seeing her read it in her like romance reading vlogs, one of them that she did last year. Now, one of the things that Kayla said, let me correct that. One of the things I feel like I remember Kayla saying, or at least how I interpreted it, was that the characters read quite mature and emotionally mature. And respectfully, like so respectfully, I could not disagree more. So these characters are 20 years old, they're in college, but there is so much just like drama surrounding these characters, and all of that drama is around like the cliques at college and stuff like that. Like, that's just not things I am interested in. Now, I think it is supposed to be fun and funny, but at least for me, it was tedious. Tedious is the best word I can use to describe it. And I have since learned that this book is, at least in the US or North America, marketed as new adult. We don't really have that category so much here in Australia. It usually does just get shelved as adult. As for our main characters, our love interests themselves, this is Kiki and Malachi. I actually quite like them as individuals. I don't want to read about their romance. To be clear, I think they're great for each other. I want them to get together and I hope they live happily ever after. I just don't have any interest in following them as they fall in love. So much of their attraction is rooted in two things. One, the fact that they're both just really hot, and two, the banter that they have between each other. Now, almost every good romance needs a bit of banter, but this banter is very like snarky, and it almost feels like the characters are spending most of the book, at least the first half that I've read, trying to like one up each other in this like verbal game of wits. So it's working for them, and I think it's supposed to come across as like sexy and fun and flirty and playful. I don't know whether it's just because I am too much of like an earnest, sincere, sentimental kind of person. I don't want like an overly cheesy romance, but I just want people to be a bit more direct and a bit nicer to each other. And I don't think there's anything wrong with this book. I can totally appreciate why people love it, and I don't want to take away from that. I don't want to yuck your yum. It's just not my kind of romance. And I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing peace, and I'm DNFing this book.
Okay, I'm like halfway through Seeve of Tranquility, and I love it. I love it so much. I already feel like it's gonna be 5 stars. I'm just really enjoying the pace, all of the perspectives.
Did I read this 250-page book in one sitting? Yes. Is this book my favorite book of the year? Quite possibly. Maybe. Yeah. It might be. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I feel like I need to sit with how I'm feeling about this for a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be my absolute favorite of the year, like number one. It's going to be in the top 10 list, without a doubt. It's an existential timey-wimey book, and it was just perfection. It's all pretty explicit, like even though there is a level of intrigue to the story, you pretty well know what's going on, or you figure stuff out well before it's told to you. Like, I don't think the surprises of the book are kind of, you know, the point or why you're reading. Essentially, we meet different characters. It's kind of like vignettes, little, like a collage, a mosaic of a handful of different characters. The first one we meet is in like the early 1900s, and then we jump forward and meet somebody else. We jump forward and meet somebody else, and basically it spans about 500 years. Now, I can absolutely see that there are valid criticisms of this book. Like, for one thing, even though we're meeting different people at different time points and in different places, very different places, the writing style is completely consistent for all of them. It's not like the author has tried to like capture a different tone of voice or anything like that for the different people and the different times and places. On top of that, I don't think that this book is hugely unique. I've read books, I've watched movies that kind of do similar things. Some are a bit more science fiction, some are less, but you know, like the idea of following different people in different times and places and watching how they're connected. That's a pretty tried and true kind of formula, you know? In a lot of ways, even though they're so different, I feel similarly about this book as I did The Golem and the Jinni, which is obviously one of the other handful of books in contention for my favorite of the year. Both of them, at least to me, were interesting stories without feeling, I don't know, like overly dramatic. They're just quite sweet and tender in their delivery. And I mean, both of them are just about the people and the characters that we're following. And yes, there is a little bit of a speculative element in both that I really enjoyed and kind of like added to the intrigue. Ultimately though, it was just the characters and the themes and the atmosphere that just really works for me. I suppose in a lot of ways, they're both books that are grand and quiet. I'm not even saying anything coherent. I'm not explaining to you anything about what this book is about. And this lighting makes me look bald. I don't know, maybe I should have waited until tomorrow to talk to you about this book. I just kind of wanted to capture this moment of the immediate aftermath of finishing this. I didn't really cry during the book, but I did tear up. I just kind of felt like I was constantly on the verge of tears, not because anything was like super sad, but just because it was all kind of just a bit sad and also a bit beautiful. It's almost 11 o'clock though, so for now I'm just gonna go make myself a cup of tea, sit on the couch, hug this book and cry a little bit. That's totally normal, right?
But we have With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo.
5 stars, almost made my top 10 books of the year.
Ollie has had a bath, so she's looking extra fluffy. We're heading around to Mum and Dad's tonight to help put up the Christmas tree. So Ollie's going to be sitting here while I talk to you about With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. So if I'm not mistaken, I have now read all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books. And I knew this was a pretty safe pick for this video because I have given Acevedo 4 and 5 stars only. So I felt pretty confident going into this one. And yeah, I loved it. In this book, we meet a young girl named Imani who fell pregnant when she was just 14 or 15 years old. She's now in her last year of high school and she's just doing her best to get by with a 3-year-old. And so obviously, on top of being a mother, Imani is just having to also deal with all the stuff that comes with being in your last year of high school. And there's just so much to think about and deal with. There's worrying about her grades and her electives, and then worrying about applying to colleges or what she wants to do after high school. There's family stuff, there's friend stuff, and then there's also a cute new boy who shows up at school. I loved Imani as our main character. She's obviously had to mature, you know, faster than a lot of other kids her age in a lot of ways, but at the same time, she's still just 17. She's a wonderful mother and she always puts her kid first. And so a lot of this story is also just about her figuring out like how she can continue showing up to be the mother that she wants, while also not entirely deprioritizing her own hopes and desires. She's not particularly great at school. She's never really found herself finding, you know, just like learning by rote and memorization easy for her. She's definitely somebody who prefers and finds it easier to learn by doing. And one of her favorite things to do, her absolute passion, is cooking. And so at the beginning of the book, we learn that there is going to be a new elective offered this year, which is culinary arts. And it's obviously a huge opportunity for Imani and she's really excited, but at the same time, she's terrified. I just loved this book. Acevedo's writing, I just think is some of the best. I was gonna say in young adult, but I don't want to limit her to that. I just think she has such an incredible way with words. It all just feels so warm and evocative, but equally it's so readable and colloquial. It has like quite a strong rhythm to it. So I just really loved Imani and I loved her relationship with her grandmother, with her best friend, and I loved watching her get to know the new boy at school too, Malachi. And I just loved seeing what a clear communicator she was. I think that's a skill that she learnt through becoming a mother. She was kind of forced to really think about and be clear about the things that matter to her and the things that she cares about and what she has capacity for in her life. It is a book about struggle, but it's not at all gratuitous. Imani has so many wonderful, supportive people in her life. She has some challenging people too, but I think at the end of the day, this is just such a beautiful book about learning to balance our responsibility and obligation to the people around us, and also the responsibility and obligation we have to ourselves too. I would say that this is my second favorite of her books that I've read so far. The Poet X is just something extra special in my mind. But with that out of the way, I'm going to go get Ollie dressed in something cute, maybe just a little bandana or something, and then we're gonna head off to Mum and Dad's to build the Christmas tree.
But I'm absolutely giving it 5 stars. It was such an interesting read. I had a great time and I love it just as much as Cersei.
Holy shit, is this book good? So this is a retelling of the Ramayana, which is a story I know very, very little about. I knew a little bit about Kaikeyi. I remember reading somewhere a long time ago something about her being like essentially a disgraced stepmother figure, but my knowledge of her and the other characters featured in this book were very limited. So I was essentially going into this book as its own entity, more or less. And almost right from the beginning, this book reminded me so much of The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. And I know that that's a book that both Kayla and I loved last year. And obviously both are kind of retellings of stories and myths, but I think some of the other parallels are, you know, the fact that both involve gods and also a kingdom. And while Daughter of the Moon Goddess is like a kingdom of gods, here we are more focused on mortals, but there is still magic and there are still gods involved. But I would say that the biggest similarity is like the narrative itself and maybe even the writing. I don't think this writing is quite as like lyrical as the writing in The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, but both are told in first person and they're very kind of like linear narratives from the perspective of our main characters. They're both also quite fast paced, although where I describe Daughter of the Moon Goddess as like this whirlwind, this I wouldn't quite go that far. It did feel quite grand in scope and it did feel like we covered a lot of space and we didn't necessarily linger on the smaller moments quite as much as you might in some other kind of fantasy book, but it didn't feel quite as, I suppose, rushed, maybe you might say, Daughter of the Moon Goddess was. There were a few moments where I might have preferred to linger just that little bit longer in like the emotional
consequences of actions and things that had happened. And even though I didn't like adore Kaikeyi as a character, I absolutely loved her. And yes, those are two different things. I haven't read a huge amount of other retellings. I've read The Song of Achilles and I've also read the Penelopiad, which I feel like if you cross the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood with Daughter of the Moon Goddess, somewhere in between there, you would get this book. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure that's where a lot of the comparisons get drawn with Circe. Because this book is very much kind of like a feminist retelling. It's recentering a female character who, from what I understand, was not the main character of the story. And while some of Kaikeyi's like feminist ideals and beliefs are very on the nose and also pretty individualistic in a lot of ways, at least in the ways that she talks about it, it sometimes feels that way. I just couldn't help but be so drawn in to her whole journey and like the tragedy of her life. It really did just feel kind of huge and grand and moving and sweeping. I think what I found really extra special about this wasn't even necessarily the feminist themes. Honestly, it was the relationships and the connections, which were a huge part of this story. Not only because of all of the politics and all of that sort of stuff that happens throughout the book, but literally because Kaikeyi does have a magical ability to basically kind of like see the threads that connect people and sometimes even manipulate the connections between people. And it's not just like a magic wand. She can't really influence people that she doesn't have a good relationship with already, people who don't already trust her, which in and of itself kind of opens up an interesting moral dilemma. And essentially her figuring out when and how to use her power is a big part of the story and of her personal journey. Watching her kind of like figure out how best to use this power of hers in a way that not only could benefit her kingdom and herself, but also wouldn't jeopardize her relationships. I thought it was really well done and I just loved it. As always with this video though, I have to ask the question, is it a favorite of the year? And honestly, it might be. I'm honestly going to have a look at the books that are in contention. And so I suppose I just want to take a moment to appreciate the fact that even if this book, you know, is an honorable mention or doesn't quite make it at the end of the year, I had such a good time reading it. I just loved it. And I'm so happy I finally got around to it. But as you can see with Ollie behind me, it's getting pretty late. It is time for bed. So I'm going to head off and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Just in case, on the off chance Kayla is watching this, I'm going to make some recommendations of my own. This might be a bit risky, but Carpentaria. It's one of the best Australian books ever, in my view. It's by an Indigenous author, and it's essentially a book about colonialism. And that's kind of all I want to tell you. The Yield by Tara June Winch is probably one of the most celebrated Australian books of recent memory. It's told in 3 parts. One gives us the history of colonization in Australia in this particular location. One is the present day granddaughter trying to fight for her family's land rights. And the other is a dictionary. This is the main character's grandfather writing down his language, his Indigenous language. And he tells his story through that dictionary. The Enlightenment of the Green Gage Tree. This is a translated work by an Iranian-Australian author. And this is one that just contains something I know Kayla loves. If you are watching Kayla and you do decide to read this book, don't read the synopsis. I don't know why, but apparently in North America, they've put like a midway spoiler on the blurb, and that reveal was like my favorite thing about the book. So I don't know, maybe just give it a go. The Dawn Hounds. This is an underrated sci fantasy by a New Zealand Māori author. How can I sum this book up? It's an anti-cop romp with weird mushrooms and pirates. And then I know you're not really into YA anymore, but if I could recommend a couple of Australian ones, I would recommend Boy from the Mish by Gary Lonesborough, or Catching Telacrow by Amberlynn and Ezekiel Quay-Mulliner. Both are by Indigenous authors. One is just one of the most beautiful queer love stories I've ever read, and the other is about a dead girl helping her police father solve a crime. It's also partially written in verse, and it's just a really quite powerful exploration of the history of colonialism in Australia. I know, hugely presumptuous of me to be recommending books to Kayla, but they're also just books that I would love to recommend to anybody watching. So, hope you enjoyed. Now back to the actual video. So we have read all of the books that we are going to be reading in this video, and I feel like we've done pretty damn well. Do I have a list of 6 new favorite books to add on to my best of 2023 list, just so that I can weasel my way into Kayla's video? Clearly not. We didn't have quite that high success ratio. But I do feel like overall, this has been one hell of a successful reading vlog. Now, if you were to press me to rank these books, I think I'd have a little bit of trouble in the middle, but I think it's pretty clear that we'd have to start with Honey and Spice, and then Emily Wilde down at the bottom. I'm sorry, Emily. I think the next tier of like solid 4-star reads is how I would describe them, would be both With the Fire on High and Comfort Me with Apples. I don't know. I really liked both of these for very different reasons, and they are very different books. Coming in at number 2 is obviously Kaikeyi. I really, really loved this book. But of course, the major success of the video, and honestly, I could smell it from a mile away. It was Seeve of Tranquility. So I think this is how I would have to rank them come the end of the video, although holding them up with one hand is very difficult. Obviously, this video was all in good fun. I have loved watching Kayla for many years now. Pretty much as soon as I found BookTube, I found Kayla. So I suppose this video is as much a celebration of my love and appreciation of Kayla and her channel as it is like the actual thesis of this video. It was tongue-in-cheek. I hope that is clear. I know full well that I'm not going to be in Kayla's video. I am an itty-bitty channel. She's never heard of me. She doesn't know I exist. And I'm aware that our tastes do differ quite a lot. It was just a fun way to make a TBR. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me. And the reason I'm dressed up all cute and I've even bothered to put eyeshadow on for the first time in months is because I'm going to be filming my favorite books video right after this. Be on the lookout for that, and you'll just have to wait and see which of the books from this video make it in to my favorites list. And of course, a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, and especially a big thank you to Livia, Lynette Brown, and Marie. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. My favorites of 2023. See you then. Bye.